today I am going to, so the piece that we were looking at today, right, was around creating supervisory orgs, went through kind of the process of creating one, going through the different flows of how you can see this information, how it's visible in Workday, the different ways that this org, like you could use tree view, you could use this information on the side as you're going through. The further down you go, it kind of shows you this. The piece that we didn't fully kind of flush out was around companies and cost centers. And I know this can be because the more you kind of navigate in Workday, it'll be a little bit easier to understand the concepts. Um, so supervisory orgs hopefully all made kind of sense. It kind of just helps you put placeholder buckets and kind of does the management structure, right? Like who reports into who, what department reports into what. Then we kind of veered off and talked about locations, then also cost centers. And one small piece that I kind of went over really quickly was also around companies. So one thing that I want to make clear is, the supervisory orgs, this sort of information is just, again, further emphasizing, like putting this kind of foundation in place so you could start hiring the workers into a supervisory org and then creating that management structure. Cost centers is also very similar, where you're creating kind of similar orgs, and that's what a cost center is. It's just an organization. It's different than a supervisory org, but this is where, like, if a customer was also implementing financials, where cost center is really important, and that's why there should be mapping of the supervisory org to the cost center. In HCM, you don't need to we don't delve into it, just because besides just setting up the structure, this hierarchy, you may not do anything else, the mapping or anything. But once financials is being implemented, then that's where this cost center is really important. And the same thing with company. Create a company to just show you. So this is another organization, and this only is important for tax purposes. So what I'll show you, and there is the same thing. You could create a hierarchy there. And so I think I used Sarah last time. And this is just to kind of bundle everything together into one. All the changes that we're doing, that's all that reorg is so that way I can find everything that I did and tie it to that specific reorg event. So I'm going to call this, and you could include it, not include it, it's up to you. And this should be company visibility. Same thing. What I was emphasizing is, of course, you could restrict access to who can see it, but usually best practice is for everyone to be able to see this. And then the really key part for company is making sure the currency is set up correctly. So USD. So every sort of org kind of has really important piece for cost centers. It's uh, business site for location. It was the time profile. For company, it's this currency. And for supervisory org, it was location. So, all this other asterisks is just nice details, but this required field is the one that's really important. And if you remember, for supervisory org over here was location, time profile was in a different place for cost centers, but those are kind of the gotchas that you have to be mindful of. So everything else keep the same. And then now we have this company. I also created a location. So if I go back to my supervisory org, this is the place where I was mentioning, where you kind of map these this information or these other orgs that you're setting up. So you can have default organizations. Basically, all that default organizations is what, if I'm at the top level and I've assigned these organizations, what is going to get inherited down below in the subordinate orgs. Allowed organizations is just saying, you know, let's say you pick a couple of, if I created 2 or 3 different cost centers, what are the allowed cost centers for my whole org structure? And then um, these are going to get inherited down, but I can choose to choose something else. Let's say maybe I just need one. I just need to make sure that part of the orgs, the allowed orgs in there, that I'm at least choosing one. So let's go ahead, update this. And the way you do that is edit supervisory org, and I will put, so over here, I will find that organization and the company, and over here, the cost center. Hopefully I worded it the same way. I didn't. Let me see if something just pops up. I mean, there are a whole bunch listed here. I could just take any one of these, but I'm just trying to see. So, and again, what cost center and company is again really important for us, it's just to know that we could do the mapping here, but when you're implementing financials, that's where the cost center hierarchy and the company hierarchy are really important. And this is where just letting you know for the what's their importance is just making sure that balance sheet, revenue and expenses and stuff. For HCM, you don't need to worry about it. You just need to kind of know that they exist and what the key fields are in case you need to create it. But more than that, you don't need to do anything else. So that was the piece that I just wanted to delve into again. Um, and then there is, let me go to this. So what I was saying, the company, what it's really important for is really for tax purposes and like the the um, for their balance sheet. So just wanted to emphasize that one more time. Supervisory orgs have their own hierarchy. Location kind of has its own hierarchy. Cost centers. So all these kind of organization hierarchies are kind of independent of one another until you start doing that mapping. So that's all it is. So I know it was kind of bundled into one class, but just want to revisit and kind of emphasize kind of the distinctions, and they are related, but they're independent. Okay, so today what we're going to go over is staffing models. Good question. How do we see multiple effective dates in an org? That's something that I will have to get back to you on. I'm sure that there's a way, I just can't remember off the top of my head right now. So I'm going to write that down so I could take a look and get back to you on that, sure. And it's probably what we were kind of talking about yesterday. Like if you've created a whole bunch of reorgs, how do you see which one is kind of effective and which one is coming up probably or what it was in the past? There's probably an easy way to do that. All right, so moving on, staffing model. So here's a staffing models overview. So what staffing models are, it just really um, defines how the jobs are going to be defined and filled. So staffing models are used to determine how jobs are defined and filled, provide the different levels of control over staffing, and support different staffing goals. And every supervisory org, as you saw, that question that you brought up, Sriram, like what's the difference between position and job management? This is what we'll talk about today is what's that difference? I just asked you to kind of default in right now, position management, but we'll go into more details in this class. And so position management is really, it allows for the most amount of control. So um, you get to put hiring rules and restrictions in for each position. So let's say the location, you want this specific position that's being open for, let's say, somebody in the IT help desk, and that person can only work from San Francisco. The location is a restriction. Um, and then I'll walk you through the other restrictions that you can have, job family, um, job group, and we'll get into what job family, job group is in a later session. But there's several restrictions that you could put in. But one key thing to remember, you put it on the position itself. and it's a single position that you're creating and the one that has to be filled. So let's say I have 5 positions, 4 of them are filled, and I need to hire for that fifth position. And once that's filled, if let's say my org continues to grow and we need, especially during this COVID situation, more and more people need more support now that they're working home and they can't come to a specific office. I may open one more position to kind of deal with the growth and the the fact that we're being inundated with a whole bunch of questions and support that the employees need. So you need to create a position in order to hire a worker in. And then can so if let's say um, somebody is I've hired that fifth position, but at the same time, um, another person, John Doe on the team, he's actually moved up, um, and he needs to he's been promoted. What I can do that even though he gets promoted, the employee moves into a different position, let's say in my org or in a different org, but that previous position is still open. So I can go ahead and still change the job that's kind of associated with it, and a position can be moved. Just let's say that that worker has been moved over to a different group. They've gotten the promotion. They're moving over. I can look to go ahead and change that position from my supervisory org to another supervisory org. And then, of course, let's say we're downsizing and that headcount is no longer needed. So hopefully one day we're over this whole COVID and pandemic situation, and I don't need as many people helping with uh, desktop support. So I can go ahead and close that position as well. And I'll jump into a tenant and hopefully this will be more clear. Job management, on the other hand, let's say, again, let's use the example for desktop support. It allows the most flexibility and it's more about speed. So let's say, again, at the start of the pandemic, I knew that we're gonna, like, everybody's all of a sudden started working remotely, and I need to support all these different locations, and there's just we're being inundated with desktop support tickets. What I'll do is probably just go with job management, I guess just take this with a grain of salt, this example, and then I'll tell you where this may not work. But I just need to hire a whole bunch of people, and instead of creating a position, like let's say I need to hire 20 people, instead of creating a position and doing creating 20 positions where I have to put the hiring restrictions, put the requirements and all this other stuff, let me just go ahead and just change the staffing model to job management. Go ahead, hire the 20 people in, and I can do that without all the business processes being triggered, without putting all these details in. I just need to create that one sort of like hiring restriction for that job and then be able to hire the 20 people. And the hiring restrictions, unlike the position where hiring restrictions was at the position. So you have to open the position and then set the hiring restrictions on that specific position. This one will take place at the org level. So at that supervisory org, I've said that I want the staffing model to be job management, and then I put and then I could do the hiring restriction that, everything is good. The only thing is, like, let's say I need all of them to work out of San Francisco, all of them to work out of the US, whatever it is, but I put that hiring restriction at the supervisory org level. And the nice thing, and hopefully what all of you understood from that definition of job management, is I don't need to define a specific quantity. Whereas for position management, I have to make sure if I want to hire 5 people, I need to create 5 different positions. Whereas for job management, I don't even need to set how many folks I want to hire. It's the same job, it's the same hiring restrictions, just can continually hire. And then when a position, when this job, what it's also kind of for folks that don't care about tracking purposes, I'm not going to care if somebody gets demoted, promoted, whatever, or transfers and stuff. There's going to be no history because it's just going to be this open-ended kind of um, job that's available. Whereas if position, you kind of are able to track all the information around that position. If somebody's been promoted, demoted, when was it open, when did somebody leave, the compensation associated with it, all that stuff. With job management, you're not getting to do that. And hiring restrictions. So I was talking about hiring restrictions and how it's tied to it. Again, um, just talking about what hiring restrictions are is really they define the rules and conditions in a position or job management. So what are you limiting the hiring of for this specific job or position in that org? So it could be on a couple of things: job families, job profiles, and locations. Job families and job profiles, like I said, we'll get into, I think, in the next session, but I'll use kind of an example today as locations. Again, if you just want a specific region, a specific area that this person needs to reside in to come to the office or whatever it is. I know a specific employee that I work for right now, even though in the pandemic and stuff, they've been opening up jobs that are quite restricted to making sure that they hire specifically in the Texas area because they're hoping that as soon as um, the restrictions are lifted and the mandates are lifted and COVID kind of eases, that people will start coming back into the office. The other area that the restrictions are the worker type. So you could be an employee, so just a normal worker, or a contingent. And for some of you that don't know what contingent is, that's your contractors. So you get to say if, again, they'll be an employee or a contractor. Worker subtype we'll get into a little bit later. Time type, again, is this going to be a full-time worker or a part-time worker? And then you could also say that there's no restrictions. So Oh, this is just summarizing again, making sure that we're emphasizing this because these sometimes come up as questions when you're at interviews or if you plan to take the certification, this might be one of the questions that come up. So in position management, the hiring restriction is applied to the single unfilled position. So you're doing it at the position level. The job management piece is you're putting the hiring restriction at the organization level. So not at because there's no specific position, it's just kind of this rolling. You get to hire people in as quickly as possible. That's the whole point of job management. And so you're putting that hiring restriction at the org level. So I am okay. So once I jump into the tenant, hopefully that'll clear up some of the questions that are coming in. There is one thing that I'd like to do is kind of build out my org a little bit more. So just kind of revision at this point. So what I want to do in this org chart is kind of mimic a little bit, but just around the IT department and just do IT operation and IT services and kind of show you. And actually, I think I had another slide. So over here, what I'd like to do with my supervisory org structure, hopefully what I selected yesterday was more positions. And since I probably selected it at the top level, all of that is being inherited down to the other subordinate orgs. And what I just want to show you is the difference between having position and job, and specifically in this IT department. So job management, for IT services, this is again that desktop support that I'm talking about where I just probably need to hire like the same kind of requirements for the people, the same sort of hiring restrictions, but IT operation, the people that probably are managing more at a higher level, I want that to be position management because I want every position there's uh, or requirements that I want for every position that's being filled. There's a certain skill set that I'm looking for. Okay, great. So now I have these two. So let's dive into the details. Open this in a new tab and go to the other one so I could show you the differences once I do them. All right, so here's where the staffing model is, and right now both of them probably share it because it just got inherited from the top level org. But what I want to do is change the hiring restriction. So I will go to organization and change the staffing model. And you'll see, just take a note of what you're seeing here before I change it. So really anything around staffing model and what I spoke about really is just this edit staffing model. And then when I change it to job position, click done. Now if I go to the related actions, what you'll see is set hiring restrictions. So when it's job management, because you can set the hiring restriction at the org level, that's why that related actions is now available. But if now I go back to this one where it's position management, you'll see that it's only edit staffing model. And another key question that comes up and will come up in interviews and stuff just to kind of test to make sure that you understand how this all works is they'll ask you, what are kind of the restrictions if I want to change from a position management staffing model to a job management staffing model? And the biggest thing to remember is as long as there's nobody in specific positions, right? You can't change these staffing models if you've already hired people into that supervisory org. So the supervisory org needs to be empty, no members, just like this. Then you could go ahead and change it. If you try to change it when there are members, it'll tell you that you need to move the members, you'll get an error. But that's something that even though it seems really minor, it's something that comes up a lot as things that stump people. Which, I mean, it makes sense, right? If you're doing the hiring restrictions, again, at position management at the position level, and the other one is at the org level, if you change the staffing models and you have people in place, then it doesn't make any sense. It's not something where you could have two staffing models for the same supervisory org. What you would need to do is, let's say this IT services, it is really there's certain people that are in positions that we use position management for as a staffing model, and other folks that we're using job management. It should just be two supervisory orgs, just kind of like what we did here, right? Even though that this is part of the IT department, but we've split them up into two, IT operation and IT services, because of the two differences in the staffing model. And let's go ahead now that I've explained that. So this will stay as this staffing model. And what I'll do over here is talk about how you go ahead and edit the hiring restrictions. So here, now that it's job management, you can go ahead, set that hiring restriction. So availability date, this is just when this job is going to be available. So these availability date and earliest hire date can be the same. It can be different. Let's say the availability date is like today, but the earliest date we're looking to hire, maybe because of we can only hire at a specific pay period, let's say, or the hire date. Um, or it's that that office isn't going to be opening up until much later, but we need to have candidates in the pipeline. So that's where it could be different. And this is where you could say that there's no job restrictions. You can kind of override any of the restrictions and say that there's no job restrictions on this. You could have the job family, job profile, which we'll get into. And this is where you can say that, I only want to hire in a specific location. So I'll say for this one, I'll just stick to SF, and the time type, this is full-time or part-time. I don't, for me, maybe all I want is full time right now, and then this is that worker type is, uh, that's interesting. There should be more. I think somebody's playing around with the tenant, but I will just then leave worker type blank and click submit. And you'll see this a lot. You probably have seen it on a couple of areas as well. You can enter comments that are going to be visible for the admins. And this is really important when you're changing some things, just so you could see, you know, let the other folks know that kind of need to approve these requests that are coming in. And I think we'll get to see that here. Um, I can go ahead and, some companies will require like specific information be attached to this, like it could be the requirements, or it could be the email discussion with my manager stating that, I could go ahead and hire more people or change the staffing model or whatever it is. So they could go ahead and add it here. I click submit. And this is letting me know that the business process right now isn't set up for the approval. It's an unassigned task, so I could just assign it to, okay, so great. It went through the job management. Here's the hiring restrictions. And these are all the people that kind of, because the BP got triggered, there's, as we were talking about the other day, every supervisory org will have a BP that it's associated to. So if you don't, and we'll get into it more in another session when we're talking about BPs and how to configure BPs, but it has to kind of follow a workflow. You can't just, unless you're kind of like a super user, the way over here in as Logan McNeil at a customer site or with the implementation partner, when you're implementing, you kind of are a super user because you just need to go ahead and um, put the foundational configuration and all that stuff. But the day to day, when you're at a customer site, most likely things will need approval. You can't just um, change things. So that's how you set up the hiring restrictions for a job. So again, it was at the org level. Now let's go at the position level. So right now, I didn't create any positions. So I need to go ahead and create a position. And the way you can do that is either searching for create position here, or going to, um, oh, here, staffing. Sorry, staffing. It's create position. So again, like me, if you can't remember, again, search is pretty intuitive. You could just look for the tasks that you need to. So I need to first create a position, and you could put a reason if you'd like to, but the title, um, right? And then I could say number of positions. Right now, I'm just looking for one. And then it's this all kind of almost looks the same in terms of hiring restrictions. So same thing, hiring availability date, earliest hire date, and then because these job profiles are already kind of created, so they will pull all the other information. So here's the description summary. I could go ahead, add the description. I can put the hiring restriction again as location, the time type, maybe this one, I need to make sure that it's full time, the worker type. Um, this is kind of set up when you're configuring the tenant before the customer is actually live on it. So this should have a couple of more values, but I will just leave this blank for right now. And same thing that I was mentioning before, and I'll click submit. All right. So now that I have that, again, the position management, here's, um, I'm creating a position and it needs approval from certain people. So because this kicked off that process, let me log in. Let me see who else is here. Able to approve these requests that are coming on. So great, it went to her. It's not letting me reassign steps. So I'll need to look into why that specifically is. It's probably because she's kicking it off and she can't approve it. Okay, so I will look into that later and clean that up. But hopefully what I showed you makes sense in terms of staffing models. That's really the main point here. Is again the position you get to go ahead. Are able to define the different requirements, and you get to do in advance. You could create a position before even hiring. That's usually what the folks are doing. And then the position, even if somebody leaves, and this is another important piece, somebody leaves out of the org, somebody is either terminated or they move to a different org, that position is always tied to that supervisory org. Whereas um, job management, you're not adding those individual requirements. You're only adding to the org level, so that top level once, and then you could just go ahead and hire people, as many people. So you probably saw when I was creating a position, it was asking me how many positions I want to create. At the job, you saw that it didn't ask me how many job positions am I creating, because it's just kind of this rolling. I can expand or retract my org as much as I want. But the caveat is with the position management, I can track a whole bunch of things. I can track when there's an empty position. I can track the compensation that's tied to it, all that stuff. With the job, I'm not tracking anything. It's just kind of this open-ended um, queue. I can take people in, move people out. It's not tracking any of that. So job management is allowing for flexibility and speed, whereas position management, it's really, you're being very intentional about the the positions that you're opening. And what I've seen with the customers that I've implemented with, or the customers that I've worked with, is they lean for more this position management. I think where I've seen it more for the job is in retail, right? Like hiring the sales folks and stuff like that. That's where it's been more jobs related, or even with recruiters, these contract recruiters, because they're just being like they're coming in. It's just a pipeline. They're hiring very few of those folks as employees. And then hiring restrictions, just going over that one more time, is you get to the restrictions you saw. It's around job families, job profiles, and locations. You get to dictate if it's employee or contingent. Unfortunately, because that worker type, it's somebody's probably been playing around in this tenant, that's been removed. So but generally it would be employee or contingent worker. This associate might be another form of employee, maybe in this tenant, but usually it's employee or contingent. And then time type is full or part. But as you saw, if I don't want to have any hiring restrictions, there is that checkbox, right? Of, let me go back to it. Oh, I need to, give me 1 second. Go to the other one. That there is no hiring restrictions, right? Like when I was doing the hiring restrictions at that time, I could just go ahead and say no hiring restrictions for this org. So let me go to a different one. And so since this is, I haven't hired anybody into it, I haven't done anything, like job done, and then now I should have those set hiring restrictions. And here's that checkbox just saying I'm not filling out anything. It's kind of open-ended, can do whatever I want over there. Let me is how we saw, like, you could go ahead, and this is all of a sudden this triggered this because I was looking for the related actions. But once it's set the staffing models, you could of course use the related actions to change it. But this is another place where you could go ahead and change what the staffing model is. But again, really important, if somebody's hired into it or you have workers in that supervisory org, you won't be able to change it. So for mine, I can change it. I can move it back to job management or move it to job management or position management. This middle one here, this is something that they had much earlier, I think, in Workday, but they're looking to deprecate it. And just a little bit of a tangent here, deprecation process in Workday, what that looks like is they'll, let's say, have functionality out there, maybe several releases ago, and they're looking, as they're adding more depth into it, or maybe um, this now has moved over into a different area, they'll go ahead, start something that they call this deprecation process. It'll be communicated to the customers that, hey, we're no longer using this, but now we have this in place. So maybe headcount management enabled before was this position management and job management, or it turned out that headcount management wasn't really the requirements that customers needed. So they're looking to deprecate it. And that deprecation process, what it is once they figured out what they want to do, they communicate it to customers, and customers have, from the point that they say that we're deprecating it, it doesn't mean like it's all of a sudden turned off. They give customers an 18-month process to kind of figure out like what they need to do to get off of whatever they're using, whatever, like let's say they were using headcount management, 18 months to get off of it. And what also that means for Workday is like we told you that you have 18 months to get over off of whatever it was. And in the meantime, if there's any issues, we're also letting you know. We'll help you with the issue, but we're not going to continue to invest in this space. So we're not going to, if it's a bug, we're not going to go ahead and fix that bug if it's associated with that. So I know a little bit of a tangent, but that's what the deprecation process is. And you'll see that as Workday continues to grow and add more depth in specific areas, they may deprecate old things because they're realizing it doesn't function for what they'd like, what's in their vision for the future in a specific area. So let's take another area, global modern services. I'm hoping someone's in here and this doesn't prove me wrong. Is when I try to change it, and hopefully I haven't selected anything else. I don't think I have. I get an error. So that didn't work that way. Hopefully I didn't mess up anybody else's stuff. So let me try something else. Oh, it's because it's somebody else's. Let me just see something. Mm. So this is part of, I think, somebody else's training stuff. So that's why I was able to change it because there's no members. But if there are members, and let me go to make sure I'm picking the right. Okay, so this one has members. Let's go down to organization and see, it's not even edit staffing model. You can't even do it. So it's not showing, it's not showing up here, and you'll just have to take my word for it just because I think other people have created their own. And if you'll see, they shouldn't have workers in there. So that's why I was able to change it. But over here, this one has workers in it, so I can't even change the staffing model because